Hi guys, and welcome back. Having spent a good few hours playing the game, I kind of wanted to take a little bit of a break from my base leveling and the crazy montage videos I've been putting out to kind of talk about my first impressions that I've had with the game. With my current progression, I've just reached level 80. I thought this would be a good time to stop and take this time just to kind of go over how I felt was good and bad about the game and my comparison with other MMOs in the past. Once I have hit level 80 and delved into some of the expansion content and endgame content that the game does have to offer, then I probably will revisit this and do a re-evaluation of my impressions of Guild Wars so far. At the moment, I kind of want to do all the expansions such as Heart of Thrones and Path of Fire and all the living seasons in order, so that means no mounts during Heart of Thrones and obviously doing the living packs in order that they were released. As they were intended to be done when they were released as well. It should give it a bit more entertaining for myself, the stream, and give me the full experience that Guild Wars has offered to other players in the past. Firstly, I just wanted to start by mentioning that this is my personal overall impression of the game, and while it is mainly positive, it doesn't come without some flaws, and it is just my own personal ramblings that are going to be in the video, so please please forgive any mistakes that I do mention in the video. Firstly, I want to start by talking about the combat and UI that's presented in the game. I find the combat to be super slick and responsive. There was no issues with kind of button pushing. The servers are really responsive to what buttons you push. The movement is also great. Being able to jump and kind of move about while you're in the air is totally different from what we're used to, especially within Final Fantasy, because when you jump and you jump a certain distance, you can't move your character. So this was strange to me at first, but the more I did it, the more kind of natural it began to feel. While there have been some occasions that this does not do well on, i.e. the responsiveness of picking up combat items is sometimes a little bit slow from what I found. Looking at you, fiery greatsword, isn't really much of a complaint, and I guess maybe more of how classes play, but it was one thing that did kind of frustrate me during the combat of the game. While the combat overall has been great, the worst that I've experienced so far, and I guess it's just not evident in this game, I think it's evident in most games where this type of combat is there, it's underwater fighting. It is the worst type of combat that the game offers. While it's not the worst in an MMO I've experienced, it does fall short on what the rest of the game offers. I find that the camera and targeting become more difficult, if not intrusive, to the gameplay. I also heard there's a fractal that's fully underwater. Like, God help me, I'm not looking forward to that. But personally, I just feel if a game is not set underwater and not built around the idea of being underwater fully, that I find the underwater segments to be poor overall. So it's not just something on Guild Wars, but unfortunately it is a negative that I have to bring up compared to the rest of the combat in the game. But otherwise, compared to others, it doesn't do as bad as some. I know World of Warcraft underwater fighting is probably just like one of the worst that I've experienced, and as for Final Fantasy XIV, it totally avoids that, which I actually prefer. Some skills I found to be a lot more complicated to use, such as certain AoE targeting, although some settings that lock onto your enemy to place targeted AoEs, which were a godsend, and I wish more games would add this feature rather than having to use a laggy macro to kind of compensate for it. I do think that this is more a personal growth on my side of things, and I will get better at using the AoE skills, but the use of the environment and the use of skills overall in the game, it doesn't have any button bloat, and I find this to be quite nice. I'm not having to fill up like 3 to 4 hotbars and still have a really high complexity to play the game. So yeah, that's a great point, that the way the game plays, and I'm kind of looking forward to getting into like the elite specifications. I've heard that Weaver, Elementalist Weaver, is probably one of the hardest for a new player to play, but we'll see where we get to on that. I think my biggest flaw with the UI in particular is there is an infamous skill which on fire specification which I would prefer to have towards the back of my keybinds or hotbar, should I say, so I don't push it as much, and when I do push it at the moment, it's usually as an accident or just a purely bad play from myself. If I was able to organise the skills on the hotbar rather than keep binding them, that would also be, I think, just a nice feature. I think this is something that the game does tend to lack overall is just kind of the customization of the UI, from at least what I can see. If I'm totally wrong, please correct me below and advise me on how I can do that. But it is something that I've noticed that I'm unable to do at the moment, which kind of was a bit of a sigh from myself. But still, it doesn't distract from the game too much. It's just a little something that I'd prefer to have or see in the game. I also want to take the time to talk about the open world and various other contents that I've also experienced while being in the game. With the open world, I have loved everything that I've done so far. The open world from the base game has been amazing. It has a lot of life in it. You can see this with the higher levels, also engaging with the activities in the areas. This is by far one of the things that's kept me playing. I've been wanting to explore every nook and cranny that every zone has to offer, and I feel that this will continue to be a thing even in the end game areas. It also enables me to scratch an itch that Final Fantasy XIV doesn't allow me to do, which is explore. While we have large zones, there isn't really much to do in them kind of once you've done the story. We do have things such as hunt trains and various things like that, but the exploration side of things, to figure out more of the zone, find secrets, it just isn't there, and Guild Wars 2 kind of itches that for me. My biggest fear with this is that once I hit level 80 and I've completed most of the content, that this will begin to fall off, and it will just be a big open world with stuff that I've already done. I'm not really sure if this is true, or if it's stuff that I will need to re-engage in just so I can complete stuff. I wouldn't mind doing that, but at the moment that is my biggest fear I have with the open world, is that it is kind of a one-time thing. I know in some of my videos people have commented that, you know, that your first time experience, they wish they could relive it, so I guess that's where my fear currently stems from, but we'll find out, we'll see, and I'm sure there's a lot more to offer in the end game. Moving on to other types of content that I've also participated in so far, is dungeons. Dungeon. Unfortunately, I've only been able to do one of them. Finding a group was probably the hardest thing to do. I feel that this content, especially the earlier dungeons, have run dry, and I think from what the community says, most have moved on to fractals and raids for the majority of kind of PvE type content and instance content. The run of the dungeon I did, which is the first one it offers, I did it on explorable mode. This was actually significantly more difficult than I expected, and a lot more difficult than the open world content. I died a lot, like so much. It did teach me how to read basic boss animations, which I thought was good, and it didn't hold my hand. It kind of just let me go on an adventure. This is when I started to realise that bosses don't have cast bars and everything is visually learnt, and allowed me to kind of experiment and test how far I could go with dodging and just kind of like engaging with the actual environment and being able to learn my class a little bit better, which plays really well with the combat of the game, I think. Having cast bars on bosses and things like that when you have so much movement in this game, I think would be detrimental. It would be a lot slower when you would be able to play a lot faster, and the challenge just wouldn't be there. Unlike in WoW and FF, where you have a global cooldown which is a lot longer, or a lot of a big hotbar blow, it does need those cast bars, I think. The dungeons also give me a sense of open-endedness, which current MMO is something that I've missed while playing Final Fantasy. The optional paths and objectives were really interesting too, as each time I did it, there was something else the dungeon had to offer me. Although I could see that being limited in terms of how many times you might want to do it, because once you've done every path, you might find that there's no real incentive to do them unless you need certain items from completion. But I'm not sure if you were to redo them again with the same character, is it still worth it, or would you just move on to something new? There are a couple of things I've also dabbled into in the game. The crafting, while simple to execute, does have a deeper layer of unlocking recipes and obtaining materials than the surface shows, and I'm keen to explore this in more detail as I hit max level. When I first did it, I was just overwhelmed. I wasn't sure how to craft, I didn't know where to get the items. I did even the newbie mistake of kind of buying stuff off the auction house market board. I just went to buy all that stuff from actual other players instead of actually buying it from the vendor. So there wasn't really anything that kind of told you how to craft, how to do the kind of building of your character in those regards. That was all something that I had to self-learn, or my chat in on my stream were able to help me with. So I'm kind of looking forward to being able to kind of explore that a little bit further when I get more materials and being able to craft some of the legendary and exotic gear. The game itself seems to hold strong and has aged well. It graphically still looks fresh. Some of the areas do look a lot less detailed for 2021, I will give it that. But I'm going to put this down as still being in the base area. I'm sure that when you get to the expansions that they will be a lot more detailed. But even then, it still has a really fine finish on the areas, even in the base game, that allows the game to age particularly well, especially in my opinion. In terms of performance, when it came to large world encounters, I found that to be some of the most interesting events I've done in the game so far, although my PC is on a lower end at the moment. It's probably about 5 years, coming up to 5 years old. I still find that even top end PCs would struggle to fully enjoy these events without frame issues and frame drops. I kind of want to personally know anybody else's experience on this, how they find dealing with world bosses when there's a lot of people, big events. The ones that I dealt with, some were a lot worse than others, especially graphically when there's a lot going on. I sometimes found it hard to actually enjoy, and I'm not sure if this is just like a performance thing down to the game, if it's my PC. I do obviously think it is partially my PC, or to an extent, but I do think that the game itself doesn't kind of give it the full capacity of what it could do in those events. So just let me know how you guys feel with this and how you guys actually experience this below. I would like to know if you guys experience the same issues as I have when I did these events. That would be great for me to at least be able to kind of gauge upon. Finally, I just wanted to wrap up and say thank you to all of the support that everyone showed in welcoming me to the community. I hope I can dedicate more time to playing Guild Wars 2. I really enjoyed the time that I've spent playing the game, and I'm looking forward to seeing where my journey takes me. My future plans are currently, especially for Twitch and YouTube, is I'm going to raid more hardcore in Final Fantasy in the upcoming expansion in terms of progression, just so then that opens more time for Guild Wars 2. I'm not spending weeks upon weeks advancing a raid tier. I can get it done quicker, which opens more time for myself. And then once I get to experience the endgame more fully in Guild Wars 2, I want to come back, do another review of my first impressions, and see where we're at. In terms of the actual channel, if you want to follow me, my MMO adventures with Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy, just hit the subscribe button below, or follow me on Twitch, or YouTube, Twitter, all those places. They are the main places where you'll find me. So click the like, subscribe, as everybody tells you to do at the end or beginning of a video, and I hope to see you soon. Take care and stay safe.